CBS News senior political editor Steve Shigaris joins me now from Washington. Steve, just your initial response to what you heard from the Speaker and the Vice President-elect.
Well, it's consistent with what Donald Trump has been saying, what Republicans have been saying for years, which is they want to repeal Obamacare and replace it with something else. We don't know what that something else is. And what's interesting about all of this is for all the years that Republicans have been talking about repealing Obamacare, there really has not been a solid replacement put forth. And so I think what you're going to see here is repealing with a delay and then replacing it with something that they'll figure out later. And what that turns out to be is up in the air. And I think that's where that uncertainty has a lot of Democrats, most Democrats, and even some Republicans asking, what's next if you're going to unravel this thing? First of all, how long is the unraveling going to take? And secondly, what is going to replace it?
Yeah, you said what is that next thing? What sorts of ideas are being discussed at this point?
We don't know. That's the thing. It's been very vague. The Republicans have just said we're going to replace it with something that's patient-centered, that's better for Americans, but there's not a lot of detail there. And so that is what we're going to be watching for very closely. The two things, which is how do they unravel what Obamacare is currently, how long does that take, and then what is ultimately going to be the replacement? Yeah,
we've got some indication, at least from the Vice President-elect, that maybe the unraveling comes via executive order.
Yeah, that's what he said, and that's another question: is what can Donald Trump do after he's inaugurated in terms of executive orders that will unravel part of Obamacare? Some of this is going to happen through the legislative branch and through the House and Senate, and it sounds like now some of it's going to happen through the executive branch. Now, how that all unravels, and again, the timing is the key here. How long is this going to take to unravel? They're clearly not going to just shut this off immediately. So how long is it going to take for it to sort of wind down, and then what is going to be available to Americans who are using Obamacare now in its place?
You mentioned that timing. You also mentioned Democrats before, and I know we just had an election, but midterms now in 2 years, that will be here before we know it. What does that mean for some of the Democrats that are in states that voted for Trump?
Yeah, keep in mind, in 2018, in the next midterm election, there are 10 Democrats who are running for re-election in the Senate who are in states that Trump won. People like Senator Joe Manchin, Senator Claire McCaskill of Missouri, Manchin's from West Virginia. He didn't show up to the Obama meeting today on the Hill on Obamacare. These are people that are going to have big questions to ask themselves about how do they approach the Obamacare votes and other issues that most Democrats are going to be pushing for. They're going to be fighting for their political lives in a year or so, and they're going to be we're going to be looking at them very closely to see how many of them break ranks with the Democrats and vote with Republicans on this stuff. That's going to be really fascinating over the course of the next year or so. Again, 10 Democrats in states that Trump won running for re-election in the Senate.
One of the things we heard from Vice President-elect Mike Pence, just in that sound that we played earlier, was that the American people have spoken. But what does polling indicate about how the American people feel about the law?
Yeah, they're split, and they've been split for a while. In the last CBS poll, a little bit more, a few more Americans, about 50%, disapprove of Obamacare, 45% approve of it, but 63% say some of it's fine, but some changes need to be made to it. And I think that's really the interesting part of it. So you have a pretty decent majority of Americans who feel it's not working perfectly and changes need to be made. So that is where the Republicans are dealing with changes in Obamacare. They're going to repeal it completely? Are they going to take parts of it away and leave parts of it in place? Again, what are they going to replace Obamacare with? That is going to be worth watching very closely. And then, frankly, how do Americans react to all of these changes moving forward?
Yeah, we saw Mike Pence obviously back on the Hill, a place he is familiar with. How important is he going to be throughout this process?
He's going to be huge. I mean, look at what Donald Trump is putting together in terms of a cabinet, in terms of an administration. Not a lot of people in that administration right now or in that cabinet that have a lot of government experience. Mike Pence, however, a lot of government experience. He served on Capitol Hill for a dozen years. He was governor of Indiana. He knows these people. He can be the bridge between the executive branch and the legislative branch on the kinds of things that Donald Trump wants to do as president. And so he's going to be hugely important in communicating and working with the House and the Senate Republicans on implementing what Donald Trump wants to do as president.
We were just looking at some video of Nancy Pelosi after her meeting, the closed-door meeting there with President Obama. Again, we're waiting for the Democratic leadership who will be speaking today, much in the same way we just heard from Republicans there on the Hill. You know, Steve, one of the things that stood out to me, both Speaker Ryan and Vice President-elect Pence today kept saying the words, "We will keep our promise to the people." This can be something that can work very well for them, or in a couple years, if things aren't going so well, those will be words that haunt them.
Yeah, keep in mind, this was a change election, and you look, especially in the states that Donald Trump won, places like Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and voters said overwhelmingly in those states that they wanted change, and they voted for Donald Trump to be that change agent. So that is what their promise was. They are going to come into Washington, shake things up, and change things. Now, change can be good or bad, and we'll see what the results of all of this change is going to be. There's no question that Donald Trump is going to, at the very least, be a disruptor of what's happening in Washington, and there's going to be a lot of change in terms of policy and in terms of how things are run. Now, how that all settles and how Americans react to that, that remains to be seen. And so, again, this could all be brilliance, and we don't know it yet, or it could be a complete failure or somewhere in between, but we'll see what happens. It's just hard to really predict what all of this change is going to result in at the end of the day.